This is In-Ear Insights, the Trust Insights podcast. The turkeys are gone, the holiday decorations are up, and it is closing in on the last 18 days of work for 2021. And as we roll into December here, one of the big questions that is on a lot of marketers' minds, particularly those folks who are searching for stuff like this on YouTube, is about social media management and social media marketing strategies. So, Katie, as you look at our performance for this year and all the changes that are happening in the social media landscape, the dominance of TikTok, the rise of decentralized social, and the craziness around all of that, and obviously the big stuff with the big tech. What's your perspective on social media marketing strategies for 2022?
If we're talking about us, Trust Insight specifically, social is a really good place for us to make people aware of us. It's really good for our top of the funnel. And I think we need to keep thinking about it in that way. So, for example, we have what we call ads, but they're just organic posts promoting our company. I've rewritten a lot of the messaging to be more introductory versus a hard sell, because that's just not where people are going to go to find out how can I hire Trust Insights. They need more information. And so social is a really great place for us to share our case studies and, hey, did you know that we have a newsletter? Did you know we have a live stream? To sort of make people aware of what it is that we're doing and the kinds of work that we do. So in terms of social, in our social strategy, in our overall marketing strategy, social squarely sits at the top of the funnel for now. That could change. We start publishing more content on LinkedIn, for example. I know that they allow for newsletters. So it's not to say that's exactly how it's going to stay, but moving into next year, social sits right at the top of the funnel. And one of the things that we're looking at is diversifying our social channels a little bit more from the usual suspects. And so we've made a strong move away from Facebook, which was never really our channel anyway. We have more of a focus on Twitter and LinkedIn, which are more B2B, but we've also started talking about other opportunities on channels like TikTok, just because, to the conversation we were having on our last podcast, that's where the people are. And so we're in the process of analyzing the hashtags on TikTok to find out what kinds of videos, if we were to publish them, should we be publishing? Is it an awareness channel or is it a retention channel? And so that's sort of where I'm at with Trust Insight strategy for social moving into next year. What are your thoughts on social, Chris?
I think your perspective that social is very much top of the funnel is one of those things we have to unpack a little bit, because I think it's also very much bottom of the funnel, on customer retention and things. If we count stuff like Slack being a social channel as well, which I would argue it is, because it's without people, there's really no value to a Slack channel. And therefore that makes it inherently social. So I think there is that top of the funnel awareness, and then there's that bottom of the funnel. Keep the people that you've earned the attention, keep them engaged, keep share of mind with them. And those two things are things that, as we talked about, I think it was like 3 episodes ago now, those have very different measures. The one thing that I think is a gap for us and a big question mark for the industry, for the marketing industry overall, is how much should you be paying for social media, right? How much should you be running social ads? Currently, our budget's zero, right? Because we
Mm-hmm.
we don't, um, and we have dabbled in it here and there, but I think there's obviously something there, because companies would not continue to spend billions of dollars on social media advertising if it was completely ineffective. But at the same time, to your point, where is the there that we should be investing, relatively scarce dollars in? And I don't know that we have an answer for that right now. When we look at the data for our various customers and clients, that we can see, it still is very much a sort of a big tech landscape. Google ads, Facebook ads seem to be like the two automatic go-tos that people uh, seem to just default to. Google ads, I understand, because obviously Google's machine learning capabilities really sidestep, I guess, a lot of the privacy issues. And Facebook is, again, billions of people there.
Facebook's an interesting one because it's also, I think it's a comfort thing. It's what people have been doing for so long that branching out into new ad platforms can be a little scary, especially when there's money involved. And that's where you start to get into more of the testing. Maybe you start with a promoted post on Twitter. Platforms like LinkedIn, unfortunately, are still super expensive. I was talking with someone last week who was paying $13 a click on LinkedIn. And but they knew what they were signing up for and they were willing to invest the money because they're seeing such good performance when someone does engage and click on their ads in LinkedIn. So for them, it made sense because their return on ad spend was going to be much better because they were able to convert these people into customers. For us, we've done so little with paid social that we just don't know what's going to work. We've tried a little bit of Facebook, but honestly, not enough that I think we can, with confidence say, here's the results and here's what our recommendation is. The same thing with Google Ads. We did so little that I can't with confidence say it works or it doesn't. So I think moving into next year, that's definitely something that we would want to experiment with a little more. Again, maybe boosting a post on Twitter just to see what happens, to see if maybe more people sign up for our newsletter, for example.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. When I look at our year-to-date attribution model, which is something you mentioned at the very beginning, we do see that there is some social stuff in there. There's shared social content, on our various social channels. There's Slack is in there. Channel-wise, there's LinkedIn, there's Twitter. So social's not a zero in terms of
Right.
the conversions it delivers. Obviously, between organic search and email, those still remain, by far the dominant channels for us. But there's enough there that I think it justifies possibly, like you said, maybe some stuff, sponsored stuff on Twitter and LinkedIn, just to see if we can get newsletter subscribers out of it, get people, I guess, mining social networks for people and trying to vacuum them away from big tech companies.
Well, it's interesting. When I see people on, Twitter, for example, there's a lot of pushback on companies that are doing the hard sell, and people are very protective of the social platform because they're like, no, it's community. It's where we connect with each other and learn from each other. And so you want to be respectful of that because those are the people who in some ways can make or break your reputation on a social platform if they decide you're doing it wrong. And so, I think, many, many episodes ago, we definitely talked about places like Reddit, where you have to have some general understanding of the culture of that particular social platform in order to even sort of enter the room and say, hey guys, I'm here. Even just sort of like signing up for an account and asking general questions apparently has to be done in such a way that the culture of that social platform doesn't immediately ridicule you off, which is a whole other thing, by the way. Because I feel like these platforms should be a little bit more welcoming, but apparently they're not, if you don't know what the rules are. But so I feel like we need to do a couple of things. One, we need to start to think about, okay, outside of like the known platforms that everybody knows the names of, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, are there other more niche platforms that would be more appropriate for us to start learning more about, getting into it organically and then seeing what paid would look like?
Yep, I think there's that. And the other thing that, as you're talking about platforms, one of the things we probably need to have a discussion about is the actual social media strategy itself. Right
Mhm.
now, our general strategy is very much a publishing model. Like, here's some stuff. Here's other people's stuff. Here's some stuff. It is not in any way a community or conversational model where we have somebody spending a couple hours a day just reading tweets and replying to things, right?
Hmm.
That is obviously a much more labor and time intensive way to approach social media, but it would generate much higher levels of engagement
Hmm.
because the person that you're obviously replying to people one at a time, just going out and answering as many questions as you can on any given day. And as a strategy, that tends to work very well if you can afford it, which is the bottleneck. Is it requires an enormous investment of time to do that well and to be present in such a way that the community around a topic expects you to be there. Like when somebody asks a question about something, they know you're going to pitch in, so they will maybe even ask you directly. And I think that that's a question for us to figure out. And if as you're listening to this episode, asking yourself what kind of social media engagement strategy you're working with. Are you working on a broadcast model, or are you working with a participatory model?
Well, and that's definitely a point, as you were showing our attribution model that I wanted to make in terms of what we're seeing is the result of the level of effort that we're putting into each individual channel. And so, we've talked about this, in terms of our own marketing strategy, we put the priority on email. So, therefore, email is the channel that performs the best for us because that's where we put most of our effort. It's the space that we have the most control over. After that, we create content and we try to optimize that content. And so organic search naturally comes up second. And then after that are all the other digital marketing channels. And so when I look at our attribution model, I feel like, yes, it tells us what's working, but it's also a direct reflection of the amount of effort we put into each of those individual channels. And so that doesn't surprise me that social shows up, but it's not a huge player because, to your point, Chris, we don't put a ton of effort into social media for ourselves, for Trust Insights, purely because we don't have the resources to do so. We do it in a more automated fashion, which tends to be more cold and less conversational, less community, less connecting. And so that you're absolutely right. If we had the resources and the time to commit to that one-on-one, that actual community and networking, we could probably see much, much better results. And we're not structured that way at this time.
Gotcha. That's what I was going to say. At what point then do we make that a strategic priority? At what point do we say, okay, we're going to give this a go and change up our strategy? Maybe not on every channel, but maybe on one channel to be more participatory. If we know, for example, that LinkedIn is the thing, do we spend more time on LinkedIn?
I think it's one of those things that we as a company would just need to say, okay, none of us really enjoy social media. None of us are really great at it. So, can we invest the dollars to have someone else do it for us on our behalf? And I think that would be, at least for us, that would be the solution. What I've seen in other jobs and other agencies is that social is theoretically super easy. So, you just give it to anyone to do. And so they're like, hey, intern or hey, VP, it doesn't matter the level. Like somebody needs to handle social. So go ahead and handle social. And it actually is, Chris, to your point, it's time consuming. You have to read through these things. You have to make sure that you're responding in an appropriate way on behalf of the brand because what happens in social media happens so quickly. And if you misstep, everybody will sort of, descend upon that misstep and it will be very hard to recover from. So you could do everything right for 18 months. One little misstep for 30 seconds and your brand reputation can be completely destroyed on social media. So it's not something you can just passively, respond to and, try to fit in. It actually has to be dedicated time. And I think when we talk about social media strategy moving into next year, that's the thing that I think a lot of companies get wrong is that social media becomes an afterthought, but it can be such a powerful channel.
Right. So when we look at our data, like when I look at my own data, Twitter is still one of the larger drivers of traffic
Hmm.
for my personal website. I think so. Do we make it a priority?
I mean, it depends. I can't give you the straight answer right here, right now on this podcast because I need to
Uh-huh.
look at the financials.
Yeah.
But I do think, we have a couple of things that we want to make a priority moving into next year. So we know that email's working, so we don't want to change anything. So if we at least leave email as is, we know that it's still going to do well. It's going to sort of keep that same baseline. We know that we want to do more with organic social, and from a technology standpoint, we've started to make those steps, and that was something that you started to do this morning and over the weekend in terms of the certain types of plugins that we have for our website. So that's a step in that direction. We have talked about creating more original content and what that cadence and those topics look like. So then next step falls social media. So we have talked about more of a concentrated effort on sharing specific, original content on social media from our perspective. So we pick one blog post, one article, one thing. And then each of us in the company is responsible then for sharing it, not just clicking the share button, but actually writing up something about it from our own voice, from our own perspective, so that the people that we interact with on social media will hopefully interact back with us and say, oh, hey, that was a really cool thing. Or I also have, a similar story. So I think we have some of the ideas in place of how we want to get there. We just haven't implemented them yet. And again, unfortunately, it comes down to time and resources and budget. And is it a priority? And for us, it just hasn't been. And we can say this has to be, and this has to be, and this has to be. But then what gives? What falls off the plate if we have to make social media a priority?
Right. No, I was thinking even further up the funnel than that stuff. Not even posting stuff, but one of the things that I tried in August and September, and to a degree in October this year, was just trying to retrain LinkedIn's feed so that I could see the things I care about, and just participating with folks to see if it made any difference. And I saw about a 5x increase in the amount of traffic I got to my personal website from LinkedIn. Um, and that's still does work, and that took, you know in the beginning it took about 25 minutes a day, and that throttled back down to about 20 minutes a day once things were tuned up. I wonder if it's worth trying a similar experiment with Twitter. Say, like, invest 15 or 20 minutes a day just hunting down stuff on particular hashtags and things, and if we have the ability to participate meaningfully in a conversation with no promotion of any kind, just literally being there so that we show up in somebody else's algorithm, shows and data, we might see a change.
Hmm. I think it's definitely worth trying. And I think that where we started the conversation versus where we're at, it's very easy for us to give the advice to other people. But for us, I was thinking about it as the overall strategy, and it felt very big and overwhelming and too much, and I can't prioritize it. But what you're talking about is the advice that we give to other people, which is start small, start with one thing, dedicate a couple of minutes a day, and then build on that as you start to see results. And so I'll say I wasn't taking my own advice. I was the one who was getting overwhelmed by, this thinking about big social media and financials and resources. And you're like, no, 10 minutes a day. You can handle 10 minutes a day.
Exactly. So I think that would be an interesting thing to try.
Hmm.
And certainly with the three of us, we each have a Twitter channel that we can play with our own, and then there's the company one as well. Might be worth just seeing what happens. Twitter search for basic topics is good enough. Like, it doesn't require anything fancy. You don't need a good social media monitoring system, though it certainly does not hurt. Um, so plug for our friends over at Talkwalker. But Twitter's basic search will get you 70% of the way, and certainly for a small test, it's exactly the right way to go. So maybe we just design the parameters of the test, and like we do for so many other things, we say, let's try this for 2 weeks,
Hmm.
and then run basic statistics. Say, okay, did we see an appreciable increase in any measures. Like, do we get new users to the website from Twitter? Do we get any, increased brand organic search mentions? Because we're not currently running any other major tests. And see what happens.
That feels much more doable, as long as we can all commit to actually doing it. Because with any, scientific test, doing it inconsistently is just not going to work. So that's definitely
Right.
something that, we as a team can talk about later in terms of what that looks like. And so when we think about social media marketing, social media planning, social media management moving into next year, for us, for Trust Insights, we still have to think small and think very purposefully. Ideally, other companies, as they're doing their planning, would be doing the same thing. And so, if you're a new company trying to get on social media, I don't, I personally don't think you have to, you know, create every single social media account in existence for your company, because it doesn't necessarily make sense. It doesn't mean that that's where you have to be. When I do the competitive reports and I look at the different companies, even very large enterprise global companies are not represented across every single social media platform. And they've probably done that purposely because it's just a distraction. It's not where their audience is, it's not where they feel they would be best represented. It's not a channel that would necessarily help benefit them in any way. If anything, it's probably just a waste of time. And so for us, I think that's also, we need to make sure we're prioritizing the right channels. And so, as we've mentioned, we've started to remove Facebook from our roster, and we're going to be looking at all the other channels that we're currently on to make sure that they still make sense, that they're doing anything for us. And then maybe we'll be exploring alternative social media channels that make more sense. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is, don't just follow the crowd, but go where it actually makes sense for you. Just because your competitor is on Facebook doesn't mean that you necessarily also belong on Facebook, because that may just be a profile that they've set up, but nothing happens with.
Exactly. The easiest way to do this, go into your Google Analytics account, choose the year to date. So I've got my personal website here. Year to date, go to acquisition in the left-hand menu, go to social, go to network referrals, scroll down and look at, just super simple. This is just traffic. Who, even if you're not doing anything with social media right now, are you getting any traffic from anywhere at all, from a known social media site? And if you are, take the one at the top of the list and start designing your experiment there. So for me, for my site, it's Twitter, right? And so I should say, okay, what do I need to do 10 minutes a day, for 2 weeks, that would help me see a measurable change in what I get from Twitter? And maybe, for another company, it might be LinkedIn. For another company, it might be YouTube. What do you need to do 10 minutes a day to make any of those numbers move upwards? So I'd say that's the best starting point for designing your experiment. Just look in your data, regardless of whether you're good or bad at social media. Are you getting anything from any of the major social networks? And give that your first test.
Hmm. I think that that's solid advice, especially as, like, right now is a really great time to be doing those experiments, as you're being asked by your executives, well, what's the plan for next year? What's the strategy? Where are we going to be? How do you measure it? Start doing your tests now so that you can then answer them in a couple of weeks and say, well, here's what I learned, here's what I think we should do, and here's how we can measure it, and here's the impact it's going to have on our business, specifically on the different pieces of our funnel.
Exactly. And if you're not sure what to look for, say on like Twitter or whatever, this would be a great time to get in touch with your SEO team and say, please give me the top 5 keywords that we're targeting.
Hmm.
And if they say we don't have that, then that's a different conversation. But certainly, if you look at your SEO keywords, okay, what are the major topics that you wish you could get some rank for? Because you're pretty sure people are searching for those things, like social media strategy, for example. If you were a social media marketing website, social media strategy would kind of be one of those important things to know, and probably a pretty easy thing to search for on Twitter or YouTube or Pinterest or whatever the channel is.
Hmm. Well, and to that point, searching for that keyword will also bring up all of the different accounts that have that kind of information in their profile, their bio, their name. And so those are probably the people that you should also be following. And so we haven't even talked about growth of the channel itself, but follow the people that you want to be following you, interact with the people that you want to be interacting with. And so it is, it might only be 10 minutes a day, but it needs to be a purposeful 10 minutes a day. And so maybe today you find 5 new accounts to follow. Maybe tomorrow you interact with one of those accounts. Maybe on Wednesday, you interact with another account, and you just sort of keep moving down that list of, places where you want your name to be shown.
Sounds like we need to write up a social media testing plan.
Mm, I'll add that to my list.
We can assign that to John on our next live stream.
Oh, good, good. John needs more stuff to do.
Um, all right. So if you've got questions about anything we've talked about in today's episode, and you want to discuss it or share your own social media testing strategies, hop on over to our free Slack group. Go to trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers, where you and over 2,200 other marketers are sharing and giving your best advice all day. And wherever it is that you watch or listen to this podcast, for the most part, you can find the channel of your choice on trustinsights.ai/TI podcast. Thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you soon. Need help making your marketing platforms, processes, and people work smarter? Visit trustinsights.ai today and learn how we can help you deliver more impact.